Websites have served humans and Google for a long time. Now they're serving humans and LLMs. It's an evolution, not a revolution. The folks that are like, I need to fire my whole SEO team, we need to go do AEO now. Like, I am 180 degrees black and white disagreeing. Good AEO, it's not that far away from what good SEO always should have been, where original, valuable content is rewarded. At Webflow, 8% of our self-serve signups are coming from AI chat. And that traffic, we can see it converts 6x better. Brand is back, PR is back, emotional connection is back. I don't think that part of the website, emotionally evocative, visually stunning storytelling, I don't think that need is gonna go away. I believe folks are gonna wanna hear your story your way forever.
Welcome, Guy. I'm super excited to talk to you because uniquely your background is extremely interesting.
Right back at you.
Early days at Yahoo, Twitter, Microsoft, founded super successful company in marketing tech, and now you're at Webflow at the center of basically one of the biggest shifts, I think, in marketing and basically everything else, you know, with AI.
We're just trying to follow in the footsteps of the growth you're driving here. But yes, we are fellow MarTech, AdTech geeks.
For sure. So I guess with that said, you know, typically start with just an intro.
I was an aerospace engineer, spent half of college coding AI to design airplanes, thought I was going to do that for the rest of my life and loved the idea.
Yeah.
Ended up doing consulting. They kick you out and make you get an MBA. And then I was in Silicon Valley. I loved it. I spent 10 years building and leading product teams. Employee one at a startup, acquired mid-sized companies, then moved to marketing and spent a decade building and leading marketing teams, also at smaller and larger companies. 15 of those 20 years were in ad tech. And then with two guys I'd known for almost 20 years, had the privilege of co-founding and CEOing an AI website personalization company 9.5 years ago that Webflow bought about a year ago, so that you now can like build these visually stunning, emotionally engaging experiences, what Webflow always had, and now fully integrated in, go drive revenue through ABM, testing, personalization.
I guess the first question, what does aerospace engineering have to do with marketing and what you do now? Where is that line?
Isn't it a straight line from aerospace engineer to CMO? I mean, that's the normal path, right?
Yeah.
It is, to your point, interesting to see more people with my background becoming CMOs as the job becomes less Mad Men, still critical part,
Right.
but more quantitative. But there are a lot more quantitatively minded CMOs and leaders in marketing leadership positions than there were a generation ago.
And you mean your background being an engineer?
Engineer, yeah. Engineer, product, and then, you know, product marketing then naturally was my wheelhouse in marketing before going CMO.
To me, product marketing seems, you know, of all the disciplines that we have even at our company, like as far from engineering, you know, as you could be. So where is that kind of linkage happening?
For me, it was pretty random. One of the leaders of ads at Yahoo, David Koo, who I'm still in touch with, great, hardworking human being, was like, hey, I know you're leading this product team, go lead this product marketing team. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. He's like, that's cute, go do that. And then fell in love with for me, the version of PM that I enjoyed the most in the spectrum of how product management could be. My cup was less filled by I'm going to program manage engineering,
Yep.
and more filled by the customer facing, deep customer insight, walking a day in their shoes and understanding how you're going to solve problems for them. Product marketing is like, okay, one step, you could argue, even closer to the customer, or at least more customer facing than that. And so it didn't feel that wildly different. And I know I'm biased because it's my wheelhouse, but I do think it's the foundation for everything. Everything leads up to brand.
Yep.
But it's based on whom are you going to delight enough that they are willing to pay you money and hopefully tell other people about it. That's true north. Everything else is rounding error. That's kind of product marketing's job.
Yeah.
And so I think it's foundational.
I agree. I guess what Webflow does, what we do, we create content, and, you know, at any given point, there's like all these tactics about what you do to drive growth. But where we always start is like, what are the foundational things that are true, right? And I think for us, it's like, why do you make content in the first place? You're trying to solve somebody's problem, right? And you need to know who they are, what their use case is, whether you have like an FAQ at the bottom or a table of contents at the top, I think is like secondary to, are you doing something useful for somebody?
Couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's because we are in spaces where the product is differentiated. Let's pick the caricature of the other end of the spectrum, toilet paper.
Yeah.
Maybe they would say it's a differentiated product. Maybe we'll say laundry. Let's pretend it's not differentiated at all, where it's all brand. And that's not the space we're talking about, right? There, I think brand is the center of it all.
Isn't that the, big part of marketing, to blur that line? What exactly is an actual differentiated thing and what's just preference in our mind?
It is extraordinary to watch great marketers take a kernel of true need and shape it in a way that aligns with their worldview. Yes.
I mean, on that topic, switching gears a little bit, like AI is the topic for everyone.
Whatever do you mean?
How, being an AI as early as you said you were, even in aerospace, like, have you seen that just change in general over your career?
Tiny, tiny, tiny bit. The AI I was coding in college was, by today's standards, very simplistic. It was an expert system which was good at capturing the rules of thumb and heuristics that experienced aerospace engineers would bring to bear. That's what it was optimized for. In ad tech and then at Intellimise, we did a lot of predictive AI, which is like AI that's been around for a long time, where we were trying to predict the next best thing to show someone, the next best action to take, the next best, and that was based on context that we had, corpus of things we could show, whether that's content or ad creative, then showing something to someone and seeing, did it have the desired action?
Yep.
I mean, that same arc was there in ads, it was there on websites, which was where Intellimise came from. And now you can create better things to show with generative AI. They're each suited to different things, right? Like the stuff we created was not able to go create net new stuff. It wasn't built to do that. Generative's fantastic at doing that. But this world we are all enjoying right now isn't great at doing this other thing. And I think we collectively underappreciate the nuances of those differences, even in our product today. Okay, we've got predictive AI to show people the right thing. The Gen AI that's in Webflow's product today, even that is tuned for different jobs. Tuning for translation is different than tuning for site creation, is different than tuning for text creation, is different than tuning for experiment summary. Like, all of those are Gen AI. They're all tuned quite differently.
I've heard people call it different things, AI fluency and things like that. But I think today it's actually really hard because the way you interact with the AI is so general. It's like talking to a person. What is your approach to actually knowing how to use these tools properly?
To your point, the problem is compounded by the fact that, unlike any other time in our lives, the boundary of what it is good at and the relative strengths change every month, every couple of months. Like, that's never happened before in any of our lives, ever. So much so that when I and others were teaching an AI 101 course to our go-to-market team, our advice to the go-to-market team was, don't track it. It's not worth your time to track it. Use the one that you enjoy. If it's important, try the 2 or 3 that we've got access to, right? We've got ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude.
Yep.
Go try them all if it really matters. If it doesn't, use whichever one you're comfortable with, because keeping track of it is so time consuming. Personally, it's time. It is a lot of time. It is experimenting and seeing, oh wait, this matters. It also was a shift for everyone from, this is magic, because in some sense it is, but the depth of the magic is not as far as all of us have been like saying or thinking it might be. It's not, I write 5 words and it knows what's in my mind and it's going to go do everything I want. Or you think about the work you do here, there's so much context, so much in prompting, in choosing how to frame what you expose it to produce great content that is going to resonate with other folks. It's magic in like, I don't know, fraction of the wand. It's not a whole magic wand. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like your approach is like, the only way you internalize it is just by using it and experimenting.
Very much so, with intention. Like, humbly submitted, I think I see orgs, ours included, going through several phases of this AI fluency where you start with lockdown, right? Like privacy and legal very correctly are like, you can't touch that. I don't want my data being used elsewhere. Okay, once you get through that and you have an approved list, then it's play, where you were describing. And I mean, there are some things in life, I would argue parenting is one of them. This is another, even though this is not as big as parenting, that you just can't describe to somebody. You have to experience it. I think the next level is focused play, where you're like, my job to be done as a marketer hasn't changed. I need to persuade people to take a certain action to move them through the funnel. That job remains the same, but I'm gonna go play with that in mind. The next level, in my humble opinion, is automating a bunch of the stuff we do today. The next level above that is automating it at a superhuman level. So we have a 600-line prompt that runs the AEO maturity assessment we created on a website, looking at them, looking elsewhere, and coming up with a report. I'm working right now on the next level, V2, which is at superhuman levels. It's 1,700 lines long. It's half a dozen agents still working on it. It's going to be bigger. And then I'm going to go run it on 10,000 sites.
Yep.
Couldn't do that manually. And then go share, hey, here's the state of things. The next level up, I think, is then actually the punditry would talk about, like, your whole job's going to change. But I think that's like several steps down the road where you think, okay, I still have the same OKR, but the way I go about doing that actually will fundamentally change. How does that rubric of 6 levels land for you?
I mean, to me, it's, about not starting too far along and taking it kind of in stages, right? Like, don't start with some super complicated tactic. I see it all the time with growth with A/B testing, since you came from Intellimise, like, people will kind of think about the tactic of, oh my God, we should A/B test our homepage in this way, where they haven't even figured out, do you understand your customer? I think in the same way that, like, you got to start at the foundational layer for AI anyway, like, build some intuition, try some things before you get into the, okay, let me try to automate content creation. Let me try to automate product marketing.
And it speaks to the differentiation and value of what you're creating here, right? It is not actually easy to do, to create meaningfully great content. It's not, even though you could say, oh, ChatGPT just created all that. Yes, and that's something, but to have it achieve all these goals, that's super non-trivial.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things you mentioned was there's no kind of guide for being a parent. I'm not sure, I can't remember how old your kids are. Have you learned anything about how your kids or other younger folks are using AI?
I have 2 juniors, one in college, one in high school, and they are mostly in the place of using AI as cheating, and so they don't want to use it. Now, I'm trying to talk to them about something that, in my humble opinion, is really under-discussed and is so foundational on, you can use AI to outsource your thinking.
Yep.
You can use AI to think more deeply. I think back to the calculator. The calculator, you can use it to think more deeply. You can use it to just not think at all. And I think there's the risk for a generation of folks who are using it massively in college to have trouble maybe when they get out in the workforce, if they're using it this way. And if you're using it this way, you've now learned so much more quickly and learned so much more deeply. And it's a superpower.
I think it's really interesting kind of the role AI's taken at schools. It's almost a disservice to not teach people how to use AI, but at the same time, I can totally empathize with why it's hard to let everyone use AI at a school where the whole system is built on assignments that are text that you can generate in half a second.
So exactly to your point, I feel like it is so hard because outsourcing your thinking or thinking more deeply,
Yeah.
you can't tell looking from the outside. It's the intent that's what's happening inside. And like, let's make up one. Why do you read Macbeth? It's not for the plot of Macbeth. It's for the critical thinking. It's for the struggling. It's for the trying to piece the pieces together. That's the part that we, in my humble opinion, cannot lose and should not outsource. Otherwise, if the job becomes, I'm going to manage a bunch of agents, you won't do that effectively if you've lost your ability to do critical reasoning. But to your point, you could just have it summarize Macbeth. There, here's the answer.
Yeah.
And you didn't learn.
I mean, I think the challenge really is, how do you design a curriculum that's testing or trying to, incentivize like the things you're talking about, which even at work, I think is hard. You're trying to get your team to use AI. If the output you're judging them by is like how many new pieces of content we can get on the website.
Couldn't agree with you more. I don't envy teachers needing to evaluate in this age. And to your point about content, I'm so grateful that the play of creating infinite content with Gen AI is not working. Like, I hope we just skip that stage. 85% of the content that's mentioned in Google AI overviews is either entirely human, that's 65, 66%, or very little AI, that's another 19%. And almost none of it is like straight AI generated. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that would be a difficult phase to work through.
I think straight AI generated is missing the point of, again, going back to why are you creating content in the first place? The framework you mentioned, I think now is a good time to talk a little bit more about that. It seems like you and Webflow have a pretty kind of comprehensive view of how people should take their journey towards, optimizing for AI, AEO, GEO. Could you go a little deeper into that?
Happy to. And I know you and the rest of the company have very well-informed points of view. And so the parts of this that do or don't resonate, please holler.
I mean, I think one thing I've learned is repetition matters. Like, we take for granted a lot of times things that we've internalized about how to use AI. If I take the comments of our videos and from our community to heart, they want us to keep, talking about these things.
We have found the same thing. And in some sense, it feels like the early days of SEO, where that was a CMO level issue. And for everyone, and then you roll the clock forward a bunch of years, it was a CMO level issue for businesses built on it, traffic arbitrage businesses. For other businesses, it was a channel. And when it was broken, it became a CMO level issue. Otherwise, it was a channel. And I could guess that AEO will go the same way. To answer your question, I don't know that it is this is the plan, but it's intended to be a framework for here's how to think about it as you choose to manage your team, structure the work, evaluate them. And we suggest there are 4 categories to think about: content, technical, authority, and measurement. And in the evolution from SEO to AEO, first, we humbly submit it's an evolution, not a revolution. The folks that are like, I need to fire my whole SEO team, we need to go do AEO now. Like, I am 180 degrees black and white disagreeing with that worldview, that good AEO, it's not that far away from what good SEO always should have been, where original, valuable content is rewarded. Okay, so in that journey, in content, you go from counting keywords to go listen to your sales call recordings, go look at the emails and pick some questions that are meaningful in your buyer journey, and then go answer them. Answer those questions fully and comprehensively, and then go personalize that so it's super duper relevant. In technical, you go from on-page SEO to give LLMs more clues about the structure and meaning of your site. So we all did a bunch of metadata for Google. We did a bunch of metadata for Facebook's Open Graph. The new one is Schema. It's not new, it's several years old, but Google, Bing, Yahoo, Yandex, and others a few years ago came up with here's the metadata to say, here's a blog page, here's a bio page, here's a product page, here's an event page, and so on. And so do that to help it understand better, and then make sure you do that on a super fast site that's accessible, because they're using that info too, globally. On authority, you go from backlinks, which still matter. It's not that they don't matter, to exactly to your point on repetition. I know you meant it about talking about this stuff, but repetition in plain text on other sites is more important than it was before. And you want to demonstrate that authority by pointing that to engaging experiences, because they can see when you bounce right back. And if the rumors about OpenAI and Perplexity creating browsers are true, they will then see, did you stay on the site? Was it engaging for you, the human? That's another signal of authority. And finally, on measurement, you go from ranking for a basket of keywords, where ranking doesn't exist anymore because it's reformulated our words, to did you show up for a basket of questions you want to be part of the answer to for that basket of questions, what's my share of voice relative to my competitors? And what was the sentiment, because the LLM is reformulating all of our words? Was it positive about us? If you only did 2 things, I would suggest go answer questions and go put schema metadata on your site.
I think one of the things that I like to start at is just what even is AI and how do you think about it in the context of all of this, right? Some people think about it a little bit closer to search. It's just a kind of evolution of search. Some people think about it as, here is a almost person you have to educate about your product and convince in the same way you have to do, if you were talking to one of your customers in person. where do you see AI on that spectrum? Is that spectrum even right? What does optimizing for AI even mean?
And in this case, AI search, AEO, GEO.
AI in the context of you as a marketer at a company trying to distribute your product. Like, how do you think about AI, I guess the LLMs, the chat app?
Yeah. I do think about it. That's an interesting, I hadn't heard that as a spectrum. And my lens, it's and.
Yeah.
Because it is notionally close to search for all the reasons we were talking about. And you are trying to educate it on your product. I've seen folks experiment with making it easier for the LLM to crawl your site. So its search budget is used effectively. So you could say, oh, I've got this video. It's an expensive thing for an LLM to parse, so I'm going to put the transcript here. Or I've got a blog post. I'm going to serve it up as FAQ. Same content, but FAQ is underneath. The transcript for sure works. This one we think works, but I haven't seen the data. Maybe you guys have data on it. And then there's I've seen others experiment with, to your point about educating it, I'm going to have in the metadata basically my company pitch on every single page. Human doesn't need to see it, but if the LLM crawls that page, I want to make sure they see my pitch again so that they are more likely to talk about me the way I want to be spoken about.
Yeah.
Have you guys tried anything like that?
Yeah, we've tested all sorts of things from everything you mentioned for on-page almost components, FAQs, table of contents.
Yep.
There's heuristics around this information is obviously chunked in some way. So you want to be
in summary,
a little bit more
calls.
repetitive, right?
Yep.
If your story of what Webflow is and why it's amazing is spread across the whole article, at least the way it seems Reg is working today, that's not really getting picked up because it's like looking at the SERP, it's going to your page and grabbing a chunk of it, and that stuff gets lost. I mean, I think for us, like what we see is correlations, I think with AEO in general, how you measure it. And if you're able to definitively say like, yes, this moved the needle, I got more down funnel metrics is really, really hard. We're in a spot where we have more purview because we have a lot of clients that have gigantic websites to test it. But for the most part, I think the thing we come back to is still foundational. It's like, is the content inherently just more useful to a person? And the metric is always that. Like, what is an FAQ's purpose? It's not some tactic to shape your content. It's like actually useful to structure your content in an FAQ. Table of contents, starting with a TLDR at the top to not waste somebody's time. My one hope is recipe sites where I have to read a novel before I get to, how to make a pizza. That will go away because I think that was an artifact of however search indexing and ranking works. If that happens, we'll be in a better world.
That would be very nice. And can I poke on the measurement and downstream impact some?
Yeah.
I watch, as you do too, 15 plus AEO measurement firms coming into existence.
Yep.
Profound, Scrunch, a bunch of others. You watch some of the stalwarts, Ahrefs, SEMrush, and others saying, hey, we're going to go do that too. And as you and I both know, for search, you could run the search once. And now we know, unlike the early days, you and I might get different results, but a minute from now, we're going to get the same result each one of us got individually. And with LLMs, that may not be true because it's probabilistic. And so for that same, instead of basket of keywords, basket of questions, you need to ask many times, and you're talking about the percentages. But in my mind, okay, you've got to run more queries, but that is measurable. So is it working? And the other is it working is for the bots that do self-declare, you can see where they're going. You can see where that traffic goes. At Webflow, 8% of our self-serve signups are coming from AI chat. And that traffic, we can see it converts 6x better than non-branded organic SEO by looking at that traffic on our site. And so I think we can make some judgment about like, is it working or not? We just ran an experiment. We're creating a bunch of FAQs and we saw 50% of our new citations in a very short amount of time came from those FAQs. We're like, okay, that's a place we're gonna lean more into. So you were saying, hey, it's hard to tell. I'm betting there's more behind that.
No, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's definitely not hard to see signs, but I think having the same kind of lens into it as you did with SEO or ads, maybe the expectation is you'll never have that. And it'll always be somewhat directional, somewhat hard to put like a really strict ROI on top of it.
It would be surprising if we don't see a Google SEO dashboard equivalent for AEO soon, or ads in AEO. Like it's just sitting there. It needs to like,
I would love that. I mean, on just the topic of measurement, like let's say you were talking to a company taking their first step into that. They have a SEO function, but they're not doing anything on AEO and GEO, not tracking any prompts. What would you say a good first step is?
on measurement, I would suggest go think about what questions you want to rank for. That is step number one, right? You had a topical cluster of keywords. Now you're going to have a topical cluster of questions. And if you're looking for inspiration, go listen to your sales call recordings. For us, it's Gong. Like go listen to your Gong calls, or go run a bunch of sales emails through an LLM and say, what are the top questions that are coming up? Pick the point in the funnel where you've got trouble. Go look at the questions at that point in the funnel, and then go. Literally the first step is just go ask that question manually. Do we show up? Do that a few times yourself and go see, do you ever show up? That'd be the very, very beginning. I think the next step might be to go get one of these pieces of software to go do that regularly and consider, do I want to answer some of those questions on my site? If there are other sites that are cited, do I want to go talk to them and see if I can appear in plain text on their site? Which is like, this is like, we would create articles with keywords. Now you're doing questions. We would do backlinks. Now we're doing, can you mention me?
I think that's where we start.
Yeah.
As well. Again, first principles, go to what you know about your customer. This is why I think, early on before we started rolling, I was talking about how, for the most part, SEO departments own AEO and GEO today. But to do it well, you're really expanding beyond the scope of what SEO departments generally have done historically. As an example, I think, what we're describing going first principles, that's been sales, that's been PMMs, who think like in those terms of what the problems are and how do you phrase them in terms of actually actioning on that information. SEO departments, they write, but a lot of what we see being really effective now is, do you show up on Reddit? Are you good at getting earned mentions that typically, PR or community would do? That's where we start. We start with measurement. I think there's open questions about how many prompts you should track, whether you go a little bit more long tail and type a paragraph versus a sentence. One of the things we've been experimenting with is, let's say you're tracking a question that's, what's the best way to build my website? That universe of questions is almost infinite, right? You can word that any number, thousands of ways.
There's no concept of canonicalization yet.
Right, but
in LLMs.
I think what is interesting is, if you start to kind of sprawl out and measure as much of that as you can, you start to see the difference isn't that big across the 10,000 ways you could word that.
Is or is not that big?
Is not that big in the sense there's not 10,000 answers to that question.
Mm-hmm.
There's also not one. So, a lot of the work we've been doing is figuring out how many almost kernels of answers exist in this crazy space of million ways to word it.
That's really cool.
And I think on the journey of where do you start, I think that's a little bit later on, but I think it's a worthwhile effort.
And then at a meta level from there, I could imagine that your answer to how many clusters of concepts are there in the answers to these 10,000 ways to ask a question, that changes over time.
I think it definitely
pretty rapidly.
Yeah, I think that's the nice thing, and I guess challenging thing about all this is the signals come really fast. As soon as you make the change, you get that feedback loop for whether it did something. So I think that says something for velocity.
100%. And forgive me, yes, that, and I meant more it's like 2000 or 2003 with search, right? Many players, algorithms evolving monthly.
Yeah.
There's a reason it makes the news when Google updates their algorithm now. It's because it's a 20-year-old industry where they do that every, 4 times a year or something. It's nice to have a learning curve like this.
I think it's exciting. Yeah. And then picking up on one of the things you said earlier on, this is what kind of SEO was meant to be. And I think what you were referring to is what you're doing at the end of the day is making helpful content. But for the, I would say, large majority, even up to today, of the history of SEO, I think it's never really been that as much. It's always been tactics. How do you internally link? How do you go out and buy a bunch of backlinks to your site to try to almost game the system there? What we've seen with LLMs, it's iterating much faster. The speed you're getting to that truth of content's meant to be useful and solve problems seems to be accelerating. If you were to paint the future of where this is all going, whether it happens in a year or 5 years, with AI and people just trying to decide like what product they buy, like what is that future?
I've got a point of view, but I don't think anyone knows, and that includes everyone working in the LLM companies, and I think they would say so themselves.
Yeah.
Opinion of one. I think AI search and SEO will merge. I think there are times when people want to hear your story told your way. So by the way, I don't think websites go away either. I think like websites have served humans and Google for a long time. Now they're serving humans and LLMs. We're just thinking a lot more about this one. Okay, but now there are times when you just want the answer in a more straightforward way. There are times when you want the synthesis and are ready to deal with the probabilistic part that comes with that. To your point about buying, it would be surprising if we weren't able to directly buy there. I mean, right, like this could be, this could, like, it's hard to out Google, but whether it's Gemini, so Google directly, or someone else, it would be surprising if you can't out Google Shopping with an LLM that can go take action directly,
Right.
So I, in my humble opinion, I could imagine there being a bunch of convergence, because just like OpenAI said, hey, it's silly that we're making you choose between all these models. And GPT-5, we're going to go do that on the back end, right? Because the consumer should, to our discussion earlier, consumers shouldn't have to keep track of that.
Yep.
You could imagine that happening here too. Does that land for you in your crystal ball? Would you?
I think so. I think I'm thinking even, further ahead of like, what is that experience for me as a marketer building my website? Like, what is my purpose when that becomes, the truth of, as a consumer, I'm talking to an AI to almost make every decision for me, in terms of where I spend my money, what I buy. Then what does my website become? What does my marketing department do?
So while I'm with you that the way we will need to try to influence LLMs if consumers are allowing them to make decisions on their behalf,
Yeah.
which to your point sure seems likely that some of that's going to happen.
Happening.
I believe folks are going to want to hear your story your way forever. I don't think that part of the website, emotionally evocative, visually stunning storytelling, it's like brand is back, PR is back, emotional connection is back. Like, because that is so different,
Yeah.
people are going to want that forever. And I don't think it's because I've got like, oh, I work at Webflow, I've got Webflow on the brain. I don't think that need is going to go away. I do think the website will now be a data source and an influencer for LLMs much more than it could be for SEO.
Yeah, I agree with that. I guess going back now to tactical things that you can do as a company, we're measuring a bunch of prompts now. That evolves every week, sure, but at least I have some visibility now into what the AIs are mentioning and thinking about my product. Where do you go from there once you start?
I'd go spend a bunch of time in your logs. I would go look at where the bots are coming on your site, because they're not giving us context today, right? They're not telling us here was the average 23-word long query, and that's going up over time. And so the best proxy for that is us seeing where did they go on our site? How often are they coming? If they're one of the bots that self-declares, to know, was that training time? Was that inference time? Was that some other purpose for the search? And use that to then influence, oh, hey, do we think we're good enough there? Oh, do we want to go do more here? Are we happy with the answer there? And you get another piece of data on it. If they gave us the context,
Yep.
that would short circuit a bunch of that.
Yeah. No, so now that you understand kind of where the AIs are looking, have you seen any kind of productive changes in what people are doing now to address those, whether it's in, SEO or product marketing, whatever it is?
I can tell you that I have spent many, many hours looking for public examples of people doing AEO well.
Yep.
I haven't found any, and I don't think it's because it's not happening at all, right? Like, there are many examples in this room and I think it's because people haven't talked about it broadly in public yet. So we as Webflow are trying very much to do our marketing out in public around AEO. What's working, the FAQ example I gave you earlier, I am certain there are changes that are happening. We watch it in total traffic. We watch it influencing where we are investing in content, but I can't point you to some public case study where folks have been like, I did this. I think 6 months from now, that won't be true anymore.
I think so. I mean, we're trying to, do our part to share as much of that as we can.
Awesome.
And one of the reasons is once you start actually breaking it down, it starts to look pretty crazy what you have to do to make that happen. It looks a little bit less like, what content marketing used to be, hire a bunch of Upworkers and, manage them in Google Docs. And it starts looking a little bit more like engineering, like product. And, at least in our view, it's a lot more productive to share that so people realize that that's the case.
We try to do similar things at Intellimise on here's the mental model to use. And as a fellow founder, I think, I'm betting you might agree with it's not the secret sauce, it's the execution.
Yeah.
Right? Like execution eats strategy
100%.
for breakfast.
Yeah. So we try to be generous.
That's
so
cool.
I mean,
that's really cool.
I think on that theme again, like I just want to be a little bit more tactical with like what we're trying. So I'm trying to think about, all the things beyond measurement now that we know again where the gaps are, right? And where we need to create more content, update the content, what's been working for us.
So how have you balanced LLM creation, human review, iteration
Yeah.
against COGS, against cost?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say for the most part, if your goal is creating a ton of extremely valuable content, there is no way to do that at scale other than to blend people who are kind of domain experts in marketing and the topic you're writing about with AI. Because I think, the truth there is like, there's nothing more efficient at the moment at writing words and almost packaging information than an LLM. And you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not using it for that purpose. If you're using it for the purpose of coming up with new information and like trying to tell a customer how to do some specific thing that only, your team knows, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Does that jive with how you think about using AI?
Very much so. And it touches on the like AI is not coming for your job. The peer using AI is. And I think you could add to that basically what you said in a version of what I said before of somebody using AI to think more deeply, to enhance their abilities rather than not think. That's the person who's going to have the job.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what we try to do internally. That's what we try to
Literally.
train for as
Yeah.
well. We're spending a ton of effort just on courses and almost giving it away for how to use AI well. What we care about is like everyone moves forward and work is done, in a new way and everyone's happier and more efficient. And I think the only way you do that is by educating folks.
We are similar believers in genuine value add. Ultimately, it's brand building and it's revenue the day after tomorrow, not even tomorrow, and it helps raise all boats.
If you were a company, again, you've started measuring, and you've kind of identified a few gaps for where you need more content. Do you have any suggestions for where you start now that, we have AI in the mix and you have all these tools at your disposal?
So leaving some of the technical stuff of like structure and metadata on the content itself, my head goes to encapsulate your brand voice.
Yep.
Some notion of a brand guideline. I think for most, it's actually super hard to create. And I actually think an LLM can be helpful there.
Yep.
If you're like, here's 5, 10, 20 pieces of content that I, the marketer, think is good. Let me give that to you, LLM. Now tell me what patterns, tell me what the style guide should be based on that. Is that going to be it? No, but will it stimulate your thinking and have you address dimensions you weren't thinking about? Almost certainly. That's really useful. So you've got that. Then you've got a knowledge base,
Yep.
like your FAQs, your user guide, your know the product well. Those two, I think, are critical, kind of required context. And now you can then go create content.
Yeah.
And I think that is part of the magic wand is not a full magic wand yet because you have to do these things in order to create effective content. I'm sure you have a bunch of other things on your radar that you need to do.
I think it's amazing that like you've converged with us on doing the exact same thing. We call them artifacts internally, but to create great content, you need to start with the raw materials. And one of the most critical pieces of that are these artifacts around what your company does, what the tone of voice you want to write in is, who your customers are, what their problems, and use cases are. That is almost always where we start. And I think the interesting thing is like, if you think about how engineers work, like the code base is almost like this like central part where that's what everybody's doing. You're compounding and building that up and up and up. And I think for the longest time, like marketers and go-to-market folks, we didn't really have that. Everything's floating around in Google Docs everywhere. But what we've seen internally is like, what's the equivalent of the code base for us is now these like artifacts around who my customers are, what problems are we solving? And those get iterated over time and they get better and better.
I have lots of energy and light bulbs going off. I feel the same way. The emotion of coding, to your point, and building, and oh, well, I built that, now that's solid. Now I'm just gonna go build on top of that. And I'm like, I don't need to think about that anymore unless I wanna come back and change it. I feel like we do tend to, as a stereotype, which by definition doesn't apply to everybody, recreate the wheel so often in marketing, and to have now this notion of, no, I created this thing, now I can go build on top of it and go exactly what you said. It's a good emotion, and to your point, I felt very much engineering vibes in trying to do some of those things.
Yeah.
And it feels, to me, I've always loved that. It feels like building.
I think what the really interesting part about you being at Webflow is like, to us, like that's one of the core pillars. Like you have these artifacts, that's one. You have kind of the workflows that almost encode the work you're doing. I would say, before AI, that work again was done over and over again the same way, differently, trapped in people's minds. But now you can encode that information in these workflows with LLMs. So that's a pillar. And the last one is like, what is my presence on the internet, right? It's what's in my CMS and whatever that evolves into, because I think it will eat up more pieces of like, what is marketing? Those are the three things that like we set up at the beginning of everything so that you can start running really fast.
Resonates a ton.
So I guess on that, topic of Webflow being like, almost like more critical now with AI than before, how do you think about that, and building for that future?
We are building websites to go be great engaging experiences for humans and really efficiently crawled by LLMs and serving things in the way that they need for that to come naturally for mere mortal non-coding marketers who are really excellent at understanding user problems, really excellent at writing compelling, engaging copy and creating great experiences to move people through funnels. We think a lot about that. We think a lot about then how do you build AI, whether it's predictive or generative, into the existing workflows that people are familiar with, tuned to the task at hand, and to our discussion about knowing your brand, knowing your product, brand and context aware, so that when you are in context on a canvas, you're like, I need to create content for this. You get something that's pretty good. Or I need to translate that. Oh, you get something that's pretty good. And that, yes, you always want the human review, but that is a lot of how we are thinking about giving people superpowers, really, and having the magic wand feel like it's a whole magic wand, not, missing some pieces.
Yeah, that would be really powerful. I think like if I'm able to iterate not just my website, but the content on it, like a product.
And now take it further. Now have it be, have your homepage feel as personalized as any fully done up landing page.
Yeah.
Where your whole experience, the words, the content, the layout, the level of complexity on it, like that's personalized for you. Literally you as segment of one. That's some of the stuff we've built and continue to enhance. And we think that that will contribute to better content, better technical setup, more authority, make the measurement go all in the right direction.
Did you see that far when you were deciding whether you wanted Intellimise to join Webflow? Because it all seems to make sense now.
Full transparency, we were not looking to sell. Webflow reached out to us, and I think their strategy was spot on. They listened to customers. Customers' number one ask was, I create this great engaging experiences, I want to go drive revenue too. And so they went and looked on the market. Fortunately, we both decided there was a fit. And when they came and said, we'd like to explore this, we were like, that strategy makes a lot of sense. It's the two parts of the marketing job, build brand and drive revenue, right? Okay, that made sense. Our initial thought was, perfect, we're gonna go do partnerships. We'll be an arms dealer, right? We'll do with you and with everybody else. And then we saw their standard for the user experience and making this actually work, right? As like former CMO, I'm used to everybody lying all the time. And they, oh, it's it'll just work, and it doesn't. But to have it actually just work, that's actually a lot of work, right? It's like, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one. No, this is the short letter. This is I've thought about what to take out, and I'm making it. And when we saw that bar, we were like, that has to be M&A. Okay, yes, we agreed. And fortunately, we both decided to do it. And customers happily are creating really amazing things with it. And you can do things with it being integrated that no standalone personalization, testing, optimization tool can do, including our own. We're maintaining one, and it can't do some of the cool things you can do because it's integrated.
Yeah.
Long-winded answer, but it's like, it was their idea, and I'm like, it's great. This really is better.
No, I think it makes total sense. I mean, again, like drawing the parallel to code, like I think that's why GitHub is the home to literally everything, in that stack, at least, within reason. I think the equivalent is Webflow. Last thing to kind of end, what are some pitfalls on this journey for people to avoid?
On AEO and GEO, I think it's two. One is the myth that SEO is dead. It's not dead at all. It's still, for all the attention, LLM search is less than 2% of total search today. I think it was SEMrush. It was either SEMrush or Ahrefs. Predicted in 3 years, that'll cross. Okay, the growth is meteoric because it's genuinely valuable. But it's thinking that SEO is dead. And the other one is on AI fluency, thinking it'll just happen. It's the first time in our lives where everyone from kindergartners through to CEOs have a lot to learn. What does it mean? How does it work? What can I do with this thing? What do these words mean? Because we made up some new language in all this, not we, but right, the world did. And not treating that as a real thing, I think is a common pitfall. On the company building front, I think it's exactly what you said, which is true north is how you're going to go delight a customer in a way that they'll pay you for. Everything else follows from that. Everything else, it's not rounding error. It won't happen without a bunch of other things, but you lose sight of that, you've lost the script. What about you? What would you say?
I would say there are tactics and noise out there. And I think your job when building a company is to find kind of the ground truths that don't change and manage everything to those. And I think, it goes with AEO, GEO, all the random tactics you see there, all the things that might work for the next couple of weeks, but not forever. The one thing you really honestly should ever only care about is, are you solving a problem for your customer? Are you giving them value and making that, the true north?
Everything else will flow. Money, promotion,
everything else will follow.
All the other stuff will flow if you've solved that.
Yeah. And I think that's held true, for my own company, for here at GrowthX. We see so many marketing teams now, and it's hard to solve every little problem, but steering them towards that goal, I think, has always been the one way to make sure we're actually being productive. Well, thank you, Guy, for coming.
Jason, thanks for having me. That was a lot of fun.